Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on our authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Good morning. Happy Monday. I'm just happy to be with you this morning. By way of introduction, my name is Reverend Michael Lavery, and I have written this book, Lucius, A Soldier's Journey, A Man's Search for the Truth. I would like to thank all the folks at Reader's Magnet for this wonderful opportunity that they've given me to share my book with you. And I hope you find it enjoyable. I'm going to be spending these booth sessions basically elaborating on the characters, the main characters in the book, kind of giving you an opportunity to identify with them. I think in order to really enjoy a book, you have to identify with the characters. I received my inspiration for this book in my daily devotions. God gave me this story as I studied in the books of Matthew chapter 8 and Luke chapter 7, the story of the centurion's servant, the centurion who came to Jesus. Actually, he sent emissaries to Jesus because he did not feel worthy to come himself, concerning a servant who he dearly loved, who was sick and nigh unto death. Jesus, of course, was coming to heal this servant, but the centurion felt that he was not even worthy to have Jesus enter under his roof, but simply said, I know that you're a man like I am, a man of authority, and all you have to do is say the word, and my servant shall be whole. And Jesus was amazed at the great faith of this centurion, this Roman. And to me, it's always been a rather moving story. I actually thought of naming the book. In the beginning, I thought of naming the book A Centurion's Search for the Truth. But then I realized that without a name, people have a very difficult time identifying. It's kind of like if our good friend Charles Dickens in his famous classic A Christmas Carol would have, instead of naming Ebenezer Scrooge would have called him the Miserable Miser. We would not have been able to identify that clearly with someone who just had a name, because he just had a name. a miserable miser. He just had an identity, but he didn't have a name. We really need a name for identification. So I looked at several Roman names. I wanted to pick one that was not common, and I saw Lucius, and I just thought, well, that's probably not that common a name among the Romans at that time period. But I discovered later that it was as common a name as Michael is for us today. But I still kept it, and enjoyed it tremendously. Now, we're going to look a little bit today at Lucius. Lucius is the man who is, of course, the focal character of the entire book. And when we begin chapter 1, we see it says, Lucius was a soldier. He had served the emperors Augustus, Tiberius the Great, with honor and distinction that befitted his proud military lineage. A military lineage, it had been said, that could be traced as far back as Rome itself. The father of Lucius spoke to him, not as a man would speak to a child, but as a man would speak to another man. From his tenderest age, he conveyed to young Lucius with great pride that in the beginning, when the immortal Romulus carved out the borders of the eternal city with an ox and a plow, Lucius's ancestors walked beside Romulus with drawn swords as his protectors. The ancestors of Lucius served with honor the likes of Julius Caesar. They marched with Scipio Africanus, who defeated the mighty Hannibal and brought Carthage to its knees. The campaigns, the conquests, the glory, the honor bestowed upon his family's proud military traditions, they were far too numerous to be chronicled. Lucius was born into a tradition. Now, anybody who's been born into a tradition knows how difficult that can be and how much pressure that can place upon a young child, because he feels almost from the time of his youth that he's being handed a torch and he must carry it and hand it on to his children, because this is a lineage that continues through his entire family. I can remember a man I knew, he was a doctor, and one day he kind of confided in me that being a doctor was not his first love. He actually wanted to do something else. Something else really was his joy. But he became a doctor because being a doctor was part of his family lineage. His father had been a doctor. His father had been a doctor. His father before him had been a doctor. Oh, we have a question here. Travis, what an amazing story you got there. Lucius is cool, strong name for a soldier. Well, thank you. I'd like to say I'd like to take credit for it completely, but I can't. It was kind of a guess. It was kind of just tossed it out there and hope for the best. I'm glad you like it. Lucius is a very interesting individual. His father is very interesting. His father's name is Antonicus. Now, as I just read, Antonicus never sat Lucius upon his knee and talked to him like a man talks to a child. He talked to him like a man talked to a man. Lucius was literally a man-child from his earliest age, and he imparted unto him many concepts that were anything but Roman for that time frame. For example, his father was a great soldier, tremendous leader. He would die when Lucius was 10 in battle. He won the imperial legate posthumously, which is the equivalent of our Medal of Honor today. He was a man of great fame. He was well known. He was very well known. And Lucius looked up to him as a soldier and as an example. But just because he was such a faithful soldier, he still looked upon many of the ideals of Rome as being very wrong. He did not like the way the Romans governed their conquered territories. He did not like the way they governed their subjugated peoples. He was definitely against slavery and thought it was wrong. There were no slaves in Lucius's house. Lucius could never understand when he went to his friends' homes as a child. He always found slaves there. Slaves did the housework. Slaves taught the kids many times, tutored the children. Slaves. Oh, I have another question. I love historical fiction, and I think Lucius presents something new for the modern reader. That's from Jennifer Jackson. Thank you, Jennifer. Glad to have you with us this morning. But he was very, very much surprised when he'd come home, and they had no slaves. His father had hired servants. And one day he brought this up to his father. He said, "Father, how come we don't have slaves in our home? All my friends, they all have slaves. There were more slaves in Rome than there were Romans. And how come we don't have slaves in our home?" And Lucius's father explained to him that he felt enslaving people was a vice. If indeed Rome was the world leader, if indeed they had the answer to bring peace and prosperity to the world, they should share this with an open hand as a friend, not with the iron fist of a tyrant. And to enslave people and bring them to Rome against their will and to force them into slavery was to Lucius's father egregious. So he explained to Lucius that all the servants that worked in their house and were paid were once slaves. His father purchased them from the slave auction, and he purchased their freedom, and he gave them a choice. They could either go back home as free men, or they could stay with him and labor in his house as servants who would receive a wage for their services. And Lucius's father said to him, "Son, I want you always to remember something very important. And that is, a slave will never love its master. He will spend his entire life contemplating and thinking how he might throw off the yoke of his master's oppression. When his master dies, he will shed no tears. He will shed no tears of sorrow. He will be joyous at his passing because he oppressed him and he used him." Lucius's father said, "You will never find a slave. As long as there is breath in my body," he said, "there will never be a man or woman in my house who is called by the name slave." This was something that burned into Lucius's soul. This was something that, even though he was a child, he was only 10 when his father died, it was something that made such an impact upon his life that he carried it with him right into adulthood. Donald Rosenbaum. Historical fiction novels set during this time of Christ are rare these days, so Lucius is a breath of fresh air. Well, thank you. Thank you. As I say, I'd like to take credit for this story, but I have to say that it was actually more of an inspiration. I read the accounts from Matthew and from Luke, and it was almost as if I saw the entire story before my eyes. And I remember I prayed and I said, "Lord, that is a fantastic story that you just showed me through this scripture, and somebody should write a book about that." And the Lord spoke to my heart about it and just kind of said, well, you know, I showed it to you. Maybe you should write the book. And of course, I'd like to say I just picked up my pen and said, yes, sir, I'm right on it. But I was kind of like Moses at the burning bush when God said, I'm sending you to free the children of Israel. I kind of said, I don't think so. You know, I've never written a book. He said, well, that's because you've never written one. You know, the Lord spoke to my heart. That's because you've never written one. The Holy Spirit spoke to me and just said, get started. So I did. And this is the end result of my labors. It's my first book. So please forgive some of the mistakes that you might find. But it's a wonderful story, I think. J.P. Abyssilia. I think theologians like me and you, sir, have a great interest in history. Making it alive through fiction requires deep thinking. Congrats on good work, Reverend Lavery. Thank you very much. Those are very kind words. I appreciate them greatly. The main purpose of this book is to show that Lucius was a man. He was a man of virtue. I know when my book was critiqued by reviewers, one of the reviewers made a criticism, and he said, your book is not really factual because Roman soldiers weren't that way. And I don't know how many Roman soldiers he actually knew in his life. But in the scripture, we see many instances of very virtuous men who were soldiers, Roman soldiers. They were not all vicious. They were not all butchers. They did not all just go forth to slaughter and to kill. There were many of them who were virtuous. The Apostle Paul had interactions with very virtuous Romans who were kind to him to the utmost. All right. Pauline Adams. Narratives about the life and death of Jesus and the Roman Empire are always interesting, but this one is unique, I guess. Well, I don't know how unique it is. But it does ring a real tone of, it touches a heartstring for me, because if you'll remember, at the foot of the cross, it was a Roman. Now, there were scribes and Pharisees there. There were priests there. They just looked at Jesus as a dying criminal. It was a Roman soldier who looked at Jesus and said, this man truly was the Son of God. He didn't understand that Jesus is the Son of God and that he didn't die, but he died, but he was coming back. He was going to rise again. He was just, all right. Donald Rosenbaum. That is what I'm trying to say, Pauline. I think this one will make a good movie. Well, honestly, I've had people call me and say they'd like to write movie scripts. They'd like to do this. They'd like to do that. I've called a few of them back, and I haven't submitted anything like that yet. I just would like people to buy the book first and read the book, because I think there's so many Luciuses out there. There's so many men like Lucius, men who they serve an empire. Lucius was like his father. He served an empire. He served Rome faithfully. He fought in many battles as his father did. He rose through the ranks as his father did. But there was no joy, because he never felt that the way Rome governed its people was right. And as his father before him, who criticized Rome very much and said that if things didn't change, the empire would not last. He was really kind of prophetic. Lucius was struggling. He was a good man. who struggled serving an empire whose foundations, he thought, were faulty. And he wanted to find truth, but he didn't know. He didn't know what truth was. Elizabeth Schultz. I wonder where Reverend Lavery got the inspiration for this novel. Well, I got it right out of the Bible. You read Matthew chapter 8, the story of the centurion. The same story is told in Luke chapter 7. Now, when you read both accounts, you'll notice they differ. Matthew chapter 8 says that the centurion came to Jesus. Luke chapter 7 says that the centurion sent Jews who had authority in the temple to Jesus because he did not feel worthy to come to him himself, being a Gentile and a Roman at that. This is not a discrepancy. Matthew just simply says the centurion came to Jesus. He sent people to Jesus. You've got to remember there's two different people here looking at the same thing, seeing it from different perspectives. Whenever I study the Gospels, I always take a harmony. I put all four of them together, and then I get the full story. Just like a police officer, if he's talking to people who witnessed an accident, he'll ask 3 or 4 people what they saw, and then he'll put it all together, and he'll have a pretty good picture of what actually happened. You've got different people looking at the same thing from different perspectives. But I always enjoyed the account from Luke chapter 7 the best. And that's where I got the inspiration for the story from Luke chapter 7, the centurion. Okay, Donald Rosenbaum. It has all the elements: a hero, an empire, a love story on the side, all set during one of the most interesting times in human history. Yes, and there's even a battle. There's a battle, the fist fight between Lucius and his and his subordinate. Oh my goodness! But the most important thing that I want people to see is that Lucius was set on the path by his father to search for truth. And he searched for truth, and he was beginning to wonder if there was even such a thing. And then he found truth. He found truth in the personage of a man, in the personage of a man that they called the teacher. And he found truth there. And there's so many Luciuses today. There are many people. We struggle with truth. We make our own truth. We practice the tenets of relativism. Truth is relative. It's whatever you think it is. There are many people today, just like Lucius. And by the way, these concepts, relativism, these things, they're not new. They're as old as antiquity. But here's a man who was searching for truth. He couldn't find it in Rome. He couldn't find it in the Roman way of life or in Roman philosophy, but he found it in the form of a man, the God-man, the man Christ Jesus, who he lovingly referred to as the teacher. And there are many Luciuses. Read Travis, it will be a good movie indeed. Well, that's from our friends at Reader's Magnet. Well, I don't know about that. I just would like people to read it. I think they would enjoy it. I know I enjoyed writing it. There were many times when I wrote through tears. I really did. I really did. And I so enjoyed this time that we had together this morning, that we've shared. I just would like to say that I'll be back tomorrow. Now, tomorrow when I come back, same time, I'll be coming back at the same time. We'll talk a little bit about the Roman soldier, what his life was like, what he had to go through to become a soldier, some of the difficulties and hardships of being a soldier. And so we can better understand Lucius and how a man who went through that much hardness could have a heart like he had. But once again, that was imparted to him by his father. Lucius is also a story of the importance of a parent in a young man, young woman's life. God help us as parents, as mothers and fathers. When we look upon our children, God help us to realize that many times what those children become later in life are imparted to them by our teachings. I had a young man came to our Sunday school. He was troubled. And sometimes he would come to Sunday school and he would get in fights. And one day I went to his mother and I was talking to his mother. And his mother said, I send my child to Sunday school so that you can teach him not to do that. And I kind of told her, ma'am, I have your child 1 hour a week. The rest of the time he's with you. He's going to learn a lot more. I can teach him spiritual principles, but if he doesn't see those spiritual principles lived in his home, they'll be meaningless to him. I have him 1 hour a week. You have him the rest of the time. You are the one who needs to impart unto this child the truths that are necessary. So God help us to realize from this book also that parenting is important. And I feel it's something that parenting's become a lost art in our culture. There's so many latchkey kids. God help us. God help us to be like Antonicus, Lucius's father. He didn't live long, wasn't with Lucius long, but what he imparted to Lucius, the concepts, the ideals that he imparted to Lucius would make him a wonderful, great, heroic soldier, courageous man, just like his father, but also a man of understanding, a man of a tender heart, a man of virtue. In the following days, as we look through this book and we unravel some of the characters, these are the things I want to show to you. And I so thank you. I thank you for your kind attentiveness and for your wonderful comments. Reader's Magnet. Travis, parenting is very important to this generation. It was lost for quite a time now. It's been lost for quite a time now. That's true. Believe me, as a pastor, my heart grieves by the many young children who don't know their father. I had a boy in my Sunday school class. Oh, my word. He gave me so many fits. And one day I said, I'm going to go talk to your father. If you don't shape it up, I'm going to go talk to your dad. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, Brother Mike, do you know my dad? And I said, well, no, I don't know him, but I'm going to get to know him. And he basically said to me, Donald Rosenbaum says, although Lucius is a historical fiction, we are all reminded that the Gospels and the Bible in general are full of interesting characters. Oh, isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? I had a person tell me one time, I don't read the Bible because it's boring. I said, well, then you've never read it, have you? Because if you've ever read the Bible, it is not boring. The Old Testament's full of, tremendous characters. And the New Testament, full of tremendous characters. But this young man told me, if you ever meet my father. Would you introduce him to me? Because I don't know him. That's sad. That's sad indeed. Well, until tomorrow. Oh, I've got one more here I'm going to read to you. Elizabeth Schultz. I love historical fiction, and I think Lucius presents something new for the modern readers. Well, maybe it's a little newer take on an old story, but I sure have enjoyed this time I've spent with you, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow, same time. I'll be here from 11 to 11:30, same time, and we'll talk a little bit about the Roman soldier and what makes him a soldier, what made Lucius a soldier, and the opportunity that he's about to have to go to a place where he's going to find truth. Until then, Mike Lavery here, Reverend Mike Lavery, saying have a great day. And I'll also be looking in on some of your booth sessions and some round tables, and I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Have a good day now. Bye.